We just can't get enough of the Rings of Power news for the show's second season, and it seems like more of it just keeps on coming. Recently, the creators of the show announced new cast members for season 2, including the recast of a major antagonist from the first season. So when the show does return to our screens, not all will be exactly the same in terms of the characters. Let's take a look. The first big news has to do with the surprise recast for a major character. Adar, who was played by Game of Thrones' Joseph Maul, will now be recast as Sam Hazeldine, who's going to be portraying the Uruk villain in the second season. The news came shortly after Joseph Maul decided to drop out for the second season. Amazon didn't really give us any explanation as to why Maul was leaving the show, but the actor himself addressed the news on Twitter, saying that he felt honored that people liked his performance as the character, but he was moving on because he wanted to explore new characters and worlds. For reference, Adar was introduced as the leader of the orcs operating in the Southlands, responsible for the death and destruction that forces humans out of the area, as well as for the eventual creation of Mordor. By the end of the first season, we also learned that Adar was one of the first elves to be corrupted by Morgoth, and that he actually tried to kill Sauron in the First Age. He had wanted to free the orcs from their servitude to Morgoth and Sauron, and create a new land where they could roam freely. Hazeldine isn't the only new addition to the critically acclaimed series. Vernon Sanders, head of global television at Amazon Studios, introduced the new cast as wonderful actors and welcomed them into the fellowship, adding that he was looking forward to continuing to tell more incredible Second Age stories in the second season. Some of these actors include Gabriel Aquadike, Yezin Zadis Atur, the talented Ben Daniels, and other names like Amelia Kenworthy, Nia Towle, and also Nicholas Woodison and Sam Hazeldine. More recently, 8 more actors were added to the already growing cast. The newest cast includes Oliver Alvin Winston, Stuart Bowman, and Callum Lynch, while William Chibb, Kevin Eldon, and Will Keane also joined the show, followed by the likes of Selena Lowe and Gavi Singh Chera. All in all, a pretty diverse cast, with each one boasting some pretty impressive acting credits to their name. So we have high hopes for the characters and the upcoming season of the show. We know that the series won't just have a second season, but a third, fourth, and fifth as well, which means that they need more characters to fill the growing world. According to Jennifer Salke, head of Amazon Studios, they are building infrastructure for 5 seasons. We're building a small city. We were always going to spend what we needed to spend to get it right. With all those seasons and seemingly endless budget, they obviously need to bring on more people to add to the growing story and world. But we don't know too much about the upcoming seasons yet, so we really can't say who the new characters are going to be playing. All we know is they're going to play some big roles in the story moving forward. So what can we expect from a second season? We're guessing it's going to involve Galadriel recovering from everything that went on between her and Halbrand, aka Sauron. Given that she kind of empowered the Dark Lord by saving his life on the raft and helping him head a whole army, we can expect some tension between her and Elrond, who seemed to have learned of Halbrand's true identity from a genealogy scroll he came across in the last moments of the first season. Now that the rings have been introduced, those are bound to play a big role in the upcoming story as well. Additionally, even though this season had developed a kind of romance between Galadriel and Halbrand, we know that her husband, Celeborn, appears in the later Lord of the Rings trilogy, so we think he's going to reappear at some point in the Rings of Power. The finale of the last season also heavily implied that the stranger may be Gandalf in his very young and early days. He hasn't been named as such yet and was identified by the mystics as Istar, meaning wizard. So maybe we'll see more of the wizards, whomever they may be, journey and role in the story in the next season as well. We also saw the stranger defeating the mysterious witches and sending sending them into some sort of exile. But we think they're going to make a comeback to find their true master to serve. These mystics are characters that have been developed specifically for the Rings of Power, which leaves us in a pretty exciting position because we don't really have a clear direction to follow for their plot. The rest of the inhabitants of Middle-earth will likely play a big role too. The story of the Númenóreans and dwarves is also likely going to be carried forward. We think the latter will likely have to deal with the consequences of the discovery of the magical mithril and their consequent greed with it. Meanwhile, the former will probably face some political turmoil as Queen Miriel and Elendil return to Númenor after the Númenórean king's sudden death. The Southlanders were also left homeless after we saw their home turning into Mordor. Bronwyn and Arondir were fleeing for the west when we last saw them, and since their original characters developed just for the series too, we have no clue where their story is headed either. All we know is that they'll play a significant role in the future conflict with Sauron. We're also looking forward to seeing what's going to go down with Bronwyn's son, Theo, who seems like he might have some sort of connection with Sauron. And finally, the character whose development and story we're all dying to see more of, Halbrand, aka Sauron. We last saw him heading back to the Southlands, now Mordor, after devising the initial rings with the elves. So in the upcoming season, we might just get to see the early days of Mordor under Sauron's rule, and him forging the One Ring in the fiery pits of Mount Doom. The new series may not have been well received by everyone, but we can all admit that there are some things it did better than Peter Jackson's films. It actually carved out its own space among Middle-earth adaptations pretty well. We don't expect it to match the original trilogy in most regards, but in some respects, it has actually captured the elements of Tolkien's world better than the films managed to. Also, given the scope, resources, and long-term timeline of the show, we're expecting a couple of moments that are yet to come that the series might be able to do a lot better than Jackson's depictions. The orcs' origins, for example. In the original trilogy, the orcs were depicted as grotesque, terrifying, and vile creatures, treated as cannon fodder for the movies. The Rings of Power, however, spent a lot more time exploring the complexities of their origins, resulting in a truly impressive plotline. They're a lot more three-dimensional and interesting, still vicious, but with understandable motives behind their actions. Even the Khazad-dûm and dwarves have gotten a storyline. The Fellowship of the Ring only gave us a glimpse into the Fallen Kingdom in the terror of Moria, but the Rings of Power gives us a look at the robust and rich society and culture of the dwarves, giving life to their characters in a way that the films never could. They aren't just there for comedic effect. They have a sense of humor that adds a certain lightness to the show, but Khazad-dûm also carries a lot of drama that drives the overall story. Even Elrond has gotten a more accurate depiction. In the movies, he's super grumpy and has absolutely zero sense of humor. The show, though, has done a far better job of fleshing out his character, warmth and friendliness, and compassion, as well as the weight of his tragic backstory. Lastly, Sauron is a lot more than just a giant flaming eye. He's an actual character. In the films, he's like an omnipotent, persistent, and distant force, rather than a person. That depiction may have worked for the format in the films, but the timeline of the latest series has given it the chance to deal with Sauron before he was the Dark Lord on his dark throne, while also rectifying the idea that he was a giant flaming eyeball. Originally, Sauron was a shapeshifter who was able to corrupt the minds of some of the greatest and most powerful characters in Middle-earth. So dealing with his character as an actual person who interacts with the rest of the characters directly makes him a different and far more intriguing sort of villain. With more seasons coming up, the show has the perfect opportunity to do a lot more with the story and characters than the films were able to. Glorfindel and Isildur's character development, for example. Even the fall of Sauron can be rectified to follow Tolkien's work more closely. We're super excited to see what's in store. That's a wrap for this video. Did you think the Rings of Power did justice to Tolkien's world and and stories? Is it on equal footing with the original Peter Jackson films? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.